So, I'm a naked sheep. Thanks to Steve. But you know what? Payback? It's a craft.
Hey guys, what's up? Crafty Sheep here with the very first episode of Crafty Commands. I decided it was about time to share my command block knowledge with the world. I am in no way a guru, but I know when I was trying to learn commands, the information for Bedrock was lackluster at best. So I was hoping that I could share some stuff with you guys and maybe help out the community who is looking for Bedrock commands. Anyways, this is episode 1, so I'm going to assume that you know nothing about command blocks. Absolutely nothing. You just know they exist and they can do cool stuff and you want to learn. So anybody that's advanced, looking for advanced stuff, this is not the episode for you. Check back in several more episodes when we get into a little more advanced stuff. So we're just going to assume that you don't know anything about commands, but you want to learn. So, in this episode, I'm going to go over the different types of command blocks, the settings inside those command blocks, and of course, how to get them. That's going to be episode 1, and we'll probably get into like more advanced stuff a little later on down the line, but we're just going to go over the basics right now. So, the first thing is, how do you get a command block? Well, you have to type in the chat. If you're on Xbox, it is right on the D-pad to bring up the chat. And you type in a command to give you command blocks, oddly enough. So you're going to go /give, G-I-V-E, space, okay? Then we're going to go @ and @ is literally, you're giving something @ we're going to do S right now, because S means, as you can see in the little fill-in box, yourself. I'm giving myself another space, command block. And then you can either hit start on your controller, or if you have a keyboard, I have a keyboard connected to my Xbox, you can just hit enter. Now you have a command block. Okay, I'm going to set this bad boy down right here. Now this is the first command block we're going to go over. This is called an impulse block. Impulse blocks are always orange. A lot of these are color-coded, and it kind of helps you understand things. So we're going to open this up, and we're going to look at all the settings. I know it can be a little intimidating if you've never seen it before, but I'm going to go through step by step, try to explain as much as I can. If you have any questions at all, feel free to leave them down in the comments. I'm usually pretty good at getting back to people in the comments. So, pause the video if you need to, but we're going to open this up. Okay, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to start at the top left. You see where it says hover note? Okay, all this is a note for you. It's like adding a name tag to the command block so that you know what it does. When you get a little bit more advanced and you have tons and tons and tons of command blocks all over the place, it helps to remember which one does what without having to actually click into the command block. So, for example, I'm just going to type for video, okay, in there, because this command block is for this video. So when you hover over it, it'll say for video. It doesn't affect how the block works at all. It's just a little note for yourself. You can leave it blank if you want to, it's up to you. Okay. Now we're going to go down to block type. Now, as I said, this is an impulse block. An impulse block basically works like a button. You send a redstone signal to it. It runs whatever command is in this little box, and we'll get to that in a minute, one time. And that's it. So it's an impulse. Now you have other settings here, like a chain block. Now notice how the color changed. This is a completely different type of block. It's still a command block, but the way it functions is different. We're gonna go over to make chain commands a little bit later on in the video. So for right now, we're just going to stick with impulse, okay? Now the condition here, by default, all impulse blocks are set to unconditional. I have yet to run across a scenario where I needed a impulse block to be conditional. I only use the conditional setting on chain blocks, and I'll explain that and what that means when we get to chain blocks. So pretty much all the time you're going to want this to be unconditional. Okay, and then down here in the redstone box needs redstone. So it's just like a button. It needs redstone to run the command. Now you have an option for it to be always active, but again, that's more for chain blocks and repeating blocks. I've never had a scenario where I needed an impulse block to have the always active setting. So it's gonna, we're gonna leave it here at needs redstone. Okay, these are all default, so you don't have to worry about if you're using an impulse block. You don't have to worry about changing these settings. They're all default set up for you. Now if we go down here, this execute on first tick, you don't really need that for impulse blocks. Again, that'll be with chain blocks, that'll be with repeating command blocks. We'll get into that a little bit later. Now the delay in ticks. This is basically like your average repeater. It gives a delay. Now, every 20 ticks is 1 second in real time. So, say I sent a redstone signal to this block. If I wanted it to wait 1 second after it got that redstone signal to run the command, then I would put 20 in here. But we're going to leave it at 0 for right now because we don't need a delay. Okay? Now over here is command input. This is where you actually put your commands in. I'm not going to put any commands in right now because we're still going over the options. Down here is previous output. This will let you know if you have any errors. Like if you put a command in and there's something wrong with it, it'll typically show up in this little window down here. So you usually want this on while you're testing things. Once your block works, you can turn it off because it does save on lag a little bit, but for right now we're just going to leave it on. Okay, so our basic command block. What do we want this command block to do? Let's say we want this block to give us bread. Okay? So we're going to go into the command input right here. And you remember before when we gave ourselves a command block? Now we're going to give ourselves some bread. So we're going to go /give at. Now before I put s at self. Because I was running that command from the chat, I was running the command. So it gave it to me at the person who was running the command. Now here, the command block is running the command. So you don't want to use @s because then it's going to try to give the bread to the command block. And it doesn't have an inventory, and I doubt it has an appetite. So instead, we're going to do @p. @p is nearest player. So the nearest player to the command block. And then we're just going to type bread. Okay? Follow me so far? Alright. So like I said, this impulse block is like a button. You send a redstone signal, it does whatever you have in the command line once. So let's give this bad boy some power. It doesn't matter if you use a button or a lever or a redstone torch. I'm just going to use a block of redstone for convenience sake. So we're going to place this down. Look, bread. And I can eat it because I'm in creative. Okay, so that's the bare bone basics of impulse blocks. Next, we're going to move into chain blocks. Now, chain blocks are a little more complicated. You can get chain blocks the same way that you got the impulse block, but there's another way you can get it. So let's go ahead and give Now, because we're in the chat, we're using @s. @self. You could use @p as well here. It's up to you. But I like to use @s when I'm typing things in the chat. So then we're going to do chain command block. Okay? And then we have this chain command block. Okay? Now that's one way you can get that block. Now, if we go back and we just give ourselves a regular command block again, you go into this command block and you change the block type from impulse to chain, you can also get the exact same block that way. So there's two different ways you can get the chain blocks. Okay. So we're going to open up this chain block. Now this has all the exact same settings from the impulse block, so there's nothing really new and scary here. It's just this block works in a little bit of a different way. Now, let's leave all the settings the same, and say we wanted this chain block to give us bread. So we're going to do just like we did, give @p player bread, and then we're going to give it some power, and let's see what happens. Hello, piggy. No bread. That's because this chain block, it isn't connected to anything. A chain block needs to be connected to another command block in order to function. That's why it's called a chain block. It runs on a command block chain. Now, if you go inside of here, we have a chain block. Now this is where the conditions are very important. So let's take this chain block with this command in it. Okay, you want to pay attention to these arrows. That will not work. You want the arrows facing the same direction when you do a chain block. Okay, so let's take this command out of here because we don't want the impulse block to give us bread, right? We just want this chain block to give us bread. Now, if we set this to unconditional, what it means is it doesn't matter what's going on in this block. As long as this first block gets redstone, it will run that command. So we do this, and we get bread. Now, there's no command in here, but there's a command in here. That's because this is set to unconditional. Now, if we set this to conditional, and we put this here, there's no bread. So now the question is, what condition do we need to get bread? How does that work? So, if it's set to conditional, if there's a command in here, any command at all, if it is able to execute successfully, it's able to run. If it can run, then when this is set to conditional, it's conditioned that this one runs, then it will activate. So let's put a very simple command in here. Just say hi. This will pop up in the chat the word hi. And we should get a piece of bread. Because if this is able to run, able to say hi, then it will give me bread. See? Now I have another piece of bread. You know, can't really... See, I have two. So that's the difference between conditional and unconditional. If it's unconditional, as long as this block gets redstone, it runs. If it's conditional, as long as this block is able to run a command, it runs. That's the difference between these two. Okay, something else you want to keep in mind. Now, I do believe, let me make sure, because I don't want to tell you a lie. I'm going to take a plain chain command block. Okay. By default, this is set to always active, which means in the chain, it's always looking for either the condition or the redstone signal. The condition or the redstone signal. That's why it says always active. I have never ever run across a situation where I had a chain block need redstone. I'm sure that it's something that happens, but it's not something I've ever run into. So you're going to want this to be always active. So that's basically how chain blocks work. Impulse blocks, chain blocks. Now we're going to go into repeating command blocks. So it's the same thing as before. You have the two different ways. Give at S for self. But this time we're going to do repeating command. I can't see the... I never do it this way, so, okay. Now this one's purple. Now you can either get it the same way by getting the give command, or you can take an impulse block, as I drop it, an impulse block, or a chain block, doesn't matter. And you can change it to repeat, and it'll turn purple. So that's two different ways you can get it. Now repeating command blocks, basically, it's got the same menu just as all the others. Nothing new here. Repeating command blocks, they either need redstone or they don't. But what they do is they repeat whatever is in this command window here. This is where all the commands go. They repeat it once every single tick. Now remember earlier I told you that 20 ticks is 1 second. So if, just if, I typed say hi, okay, very simple command as earlier. Now right now it's set to needs redstone. You can, it depends on what you're doing, whether you want it to be always active or needs redstone. This is a very simple setting here for this type of block. You either need to activate it by redstone or it's just constantly running. So let's just see needs redstone and we'll give this little guy power. Okay. Now you see how much that's spamming because it's running that command every 20 times a second. Okay, now we're gonna stop that. Wait for the chat to catch up. Once that goes away, okay. Now, yeah, like I said, you can set it up for either needs redstone or you can set it for always active. And then it's going to do the same thing. It's going to spam the chat every 20 times a second. Now, if we don't want it to go that fast, this is where we go down here. Okay? Delay in ticks. If we want it to say hi every second, then we can set that to 20. See, it's much slower now. If we want it to say hi every 2 seconds, we set it to 40. You see, this is where this actually comes in, the delay in ticks. Sometimes you use delay in ticks in the other command blocks, but I'm trying to keep things as simple as possible. Now, this execute on first tick is checked on by default. But say we had this as needs redstone, okay? And I wanted it to wait 2 seconds after it received the redstone signal to start. Then I would go down here and I would click this off. Because as soon as it gets a redstone signal, if this is on, it will run the command. If this is clicked to off, it will take the delay into account before running the command. So see, it waited 1 second before running it. So that's where this whole delay in ticks and execute on first tick scenario comes into play. Okay, so that's the 3 basic commands that most people use in all the other stuff. Now there is a fourth. There is another command block. There we go. Okay, the last command block that we have available to us, at least in Bedrock, I'm not sure about PC. I think they're all the same. Is called. Okay, the last one that we have is a command block minecart. Okay, now this one, it's not used a lot, or at least I haven't seen it used a lot. But it does have its uses. It's good for delays if you need something to have a really long delay or timing or so this one is you can't change any of the settings. This is repeat, unconditional, needs redstone. It is locked into this setting. Now the only way that this command block will execute whatever command is in this little window is if this cart goes over an activator rail that's powered. That's the only way to get it to run the commands. There's not a lot of scenarios I can think of where you would use this, not off the top of my head. But for example, in CC, I use this for a snowplow. I have a command inside of one of these blocks that clears snow 5 blocks in every direction around the command block. So I have it going on a little track just around town, and every 5 blocks or so it activates to delete the snow. That's just one example of how I use these, but I'm just going to show you quite simply. Again, we're just going to keep with the simple say command, hi, that as soon as it hits the activator rail, it executes the command. It got off the track, but you get my point. That's how that particular command block works. You really can't change any settings. It's a one and done. It's only activated by this rail, and so it's used for very specific things. So, in conclusion, we went over impulse blocks, which are executable one time, kind of like a button. Chain blocks, which are dependent on the block that it's connected to make the chain. And repeating command blocks, which will repeat a command over and over and over again for however long you set it to. These are the basic commands, the command blocks that are in Bedrock. I'm going to get into some more advanced commands a little bit later on. I just wanted to introduce you to the blocks, introduce you to the settings inside the blocks, what they can and can't do. So this was just an intro. Welcome to the wonderful world of command blocks. I know it can be scary and very intimidating sometimes, but I'm here to help you, and I'm hoping that together maybe we can learn some new stuff. If you have any questions or any specific commands you want me to go over, any requests, just leave a comment down in the description. And that's gonna about do it for episode 1. So thank you guys so much for watching, and you stay crafty. Bye!